November 23rd, 1963. Frank Sinatra sat in his Palm Springs study at 3 a.m., staring at the manila envelope that had been slipped under his door sometime during the night. No postmark, no return address, just his name written in block letters across the front. Inside were photographs and documents that would change everything Frank thought he knew about power, loyalty, and the price of keeping secrets. The first photograph showed President John F. Kennedy getting into the presidential limousine in Dallas. But this wasn't a photo Frank had ever seen in any newspaper or television report. The angle was wrong. The timing was wrong. This photo was taken from a building Frank recognized, the Texas School Book Depository. But it was taken from a different floor, a different window, a different angle than where Lee Harvey Oswald was supposed to have been positioned. The second photograph made Frank's hands shake uncontrollably. It showed a man in a dark suit standing behind a chain-link fence on the grassy knoll, holding what appeared to be a high-powered rifle. The man's face was clearly visible, and Frank recognized him immediately. It was Charles Chuck Nicoletti, one of Sam Giancana's most trusted enforcers and professional killers. But it was the third document that made Frank realize his life would never be the same. It was a handwritten note, and Frank recognized the distinctive scrawl immediately. It was from Sam Giancana himself, written in the same hand that had signed birthday cards and Christmas gifts for Frank's children. The note was brief, but its implications were staggering. Frankie Jack forgot who his real friends were. Sometimes friends have to remind each other about loyalty. The favor has been repaid. Or even now, Momo. Frank set the documents down with trembling hands and walked to his bar. He poured 3 fingers of Jack Daniels and tried to process what he was looking at. These weren't the ravings of a conspiracy theorist or the fabrications of a blackmailer looking for money. These were operational documents from the Chicago crime family's most sensitive files. Someone had given Frank Sinatra evidence that the mob had killed President Kennedy. But who? Who had access to these documents? Who had taken the enormous risk of stealing them from Sam Giancana's organization? And what did they expect Frank to do with information that could bring down the government and get him killed in the process? To understand why Frank Sinatra received those documents, you need to understand the complex web of relationships that connected the White House, the Chicago mob, and the entertainment industry in the early 1960 seconds. Frank wasn't just a singer who happened to know some mobsters. He was the crucial link between organized crime and the Kennedy administration, a position that had made him one of the most powerful men in America and ultimately one of the most vulnerable. Frank's relationship with Sam Momo Giancana went back to the late 1940 seconds, when both men were climbing their respective ladders of success in post-war America. Sam was working his way up through the Chicago outfit, using violence, intimidation, and political corruption to build his criminal empire. Frank was working his way up through the entertainment industry, using talent, charisma, and sheer force of personality to become the biggest star in popular music. But they shared something more than ambition. They shared an understanding of how real power worked in America. Sam taught Frank that in this country, the people who appeared to run things weren't always the people who actually ran things. The politicians, the judges, the police chiefs, they were all employees, paid servants of deeper interests. The real bosses were the men who stayed in the shadows, who made the phone calls that mattered, who decided which candidates got elected and which got destroyed. Frank taught Sam that power without legitimacy was limited power. You could control territory through violence, you could control money through corruption, but if you wanted to control the country, you needed to control the people who shaped public opinion. You needed Hollywood. You needed the entertainment industry. You needed the ability to make millions of Americans love you or hate you with a song, a movie, a performance. Their partnership reached its peak during the 1960 presidential election. John F. Kennedy was running against Richard Nixon, and the race was expected to be the closest in American history. Sam Giancana controlled the political machinery in Illinois, one of the most crucial swing states in the country. But Sam needed a reason to support Kennedy over Nixon, and Frank Sinatra provided that reason. Frank had been friends with Jack Kennedy since the 1940 seconds, back when Jack was a young congressman and Frank was still breaking free from Tommy Dorsey's orchestra. They were both ambitious, charismatic men who understood that politics and entertainment were different sides of the same business, the business of making people believe in something that might not be entirely real. When Jack decided to run for president, Frank became his unofficial ambassador to the criminal underworld. Frank explained to Sam that a Kennedy presidency would be good for business. The new administration would focus on international threats like the Soviet Union and Cuba, not domestic issues like organized crime. The Justice Department would be occupied with civil rights and foreign policy, not racketeering prosecutions. In exchange for Sam's help in delivering Illinois, Frank promised that a Kennedy administration would essentially leave the mob alone. Sam agreed to the deal. The Chicago outfit delivered Illinois to Kennedy by a margin of less than 9,000 votes, a margin that many historians believe was achieved through systematic voter fraud, intimidation of opposition voters, and outright ballot stuffing in key precincts controlled by the mob. Without Illinois, Richard Nixon would have been president. But the deal between Frank, Sam, and Jack Kennedy began to unravel almost immediately after the inauguration. Bobby Kennedy, the new Attorney General and Jack's younger brother, had very different ideas about how to handle organized crime. Bobby saw the mob as a cancer that needed to be cut out of American society. He launched an unprecedented campaign against organized crime, targeting the very people who had helped put his brother in office. Sam Giancana felt betrayed in the deepest possible way. He had delivered the presidency to Jack Kennedy, risking everything his organization had built, and in return he was being hunted by federal agents like a common criminal. FBI surveillance teams followed him everywhere he went. His phones were tapped, his businesses were raided, his associates were being arrested and prosecuted with a vigor that the Justice Department had never shown toward organized crime. The final humiliation came in March 1962, when Jack Kennedy was scheduled to stay at Frank's Palm Springs compound during a West Coast trip. Frank had spent months preparing for the visit, installing new security systems, building a helicopter pad specifically for presidential use. At the last minute, Bobby Kennedy convinced Jack to stay at Bing Crosby's house instead, citing security concerns about Frank's organized crime connections. Frank was devastated and humiliated, but for Sam Giancana, the Palm Springs snub was more than a personal insult. It was a declaration of war against organized crime by an administration that owed its very existence to organized crime. By late 1962, Sam was talking openly about solving the Kennedy problem, but he understood that killing a president would bring the full weight of the federal government down on organized crime, unless the assassination could be blamed on someone else, someone with communist connections, someone like Lee Harvey Oswald. The planning for the Kennedy assassination began in early 1963, according to the documents Frank received. But it wasn't just a mob operation. The conspiracy involved elements within the Central Intelligence Agency who had their own reasons for wanting the Kennedy administration eliminated. The CIA had been working with organized crime since the late 1952 on various operations, most notably attempts to assassinate Fidel Castro. The agency needed the mob's expertise in violence and their connections to anti-Castro Cubans. The mob needed the CIA's resources and legal protection for their activities, but by 1963, this partnership was becoming a liability for both sides. Bobby Kennedy's Justice Department was getting uncomfortably close to exposing the CIA mob collaboration in the Castro assassination plots. If that information became public, it would destroy both the agency's reputation and the mob's ability to operate. Some elements within the CIA began to see the Kennedy brothers as the real threat to American security. Jack was supposedly going soft on communism, talking about peaceful coexistence with the Soviet Union. Bobby was threatening to expose intelligence operations that were crucial to national defense. When Sam Giancana approached certain CIA contacts about solving the Kennedy problem, he found receptive ears. The agency couldn't officially sanction the assassination of an American president, but they could provide support, resources, and cover for an operation that would serve their interests. 3 days after Frank received the manila envelope, he got an unexpected visitor. Tony the Ant Spilotro, one of the younger members of the Chicago outfit, appeared at Frank's front gate, claiming he needed to speak urgently about those papers you received. Frank was terrified. If Sam knew about the documents, Frank's life was over. But when Tony was escorted to Frank's study, he looked more nervous than threatening. "Mr. Sinatra, I need you to know something," Tony said, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. "I'm the one who sent you those documents." Frank stared at the young mobster in disbelief. "You? Why?" "Because Sam's lost his mind. Because what happened in Dallas was supposed to be a limited CIA operation, not a mob hit that could be traced back to Chicago. 'Cause I think Sam's gonna try to pin this whole thing on you when the investigation gets too close." Frank felt the room spinning around him. "What are you talking about?" "The CIA guys think Sam acted on his own initiative. They don't know that Sam has been planning this for months, that he used their resources for his own revenge. And when this thing eventually comes out, and it will come out, Sam's gonna need a fall guy." Tony leaned forward urgently. "Mr. Sinatra, Sam's already been telling people that you were the one who suggested going after Kennedy, that you were angry about the Palm Springs thing and wanted revenge, that you provided information about Kennedy's security arrangements." Frank's mouth went dry. "Me? You? Sam's got people who'll swear they heard you say these things. And when the time comes, who's the public gonna believe? The crooner from Hoboken or the decorated war hero who was supposedly killed by a lone communist?" Tony reached into his jacket and pulled out another manila envelope. "There's more evidence in here. Photos of the real shooters, financial records showing payments from CIA front companies. Meeting notes that prove this conspiracy goes all the way to the top." Frank stared at the envelope like it was a poisonous snake. "I can't take that. If Sam finds out," "Sam's not gonna find out. He doesn't know that I've been keeping my own insurance policy." Tony placed the envelope on Frank's desk. "Mr. Sinatra, you got a choice. You can pretend none of this happened and hope Sam never uses you as his patsy. Or you can use what I'm giving you to protect yourself." After Tony left, Frank sat for hours staring at the two envelopes. Finally, as the sun set over the desert, he made his decision. He opened his personal safe and placed both envelopes inside. Frank Sinatra had just become the keeper of America's deadliest secret. 3 weeks later, Frank's world collapsed. He was having lunch at the Beverly Hills Hotel when two men in expensive suits approached his table. "Mr. Sinatra," the older man said, flashing his credentials. "Special Agent William Sullivan, FBI. This is Agent James Hosty. We'd like to speak with you privately." Frank's blood turned to ice. Agent Hosty, he recognized that name. James Hosty was the FBI agent who had been monitoring Lee Harvey Oswald before the assassination. 20 minutes later, Frank found himself in an unmarked government sedan. When they stopped, it wasn't at the federal building. It was at a nondescript office building in Century City. Agent Sullivan sat across from Frank and placed a series of photographs on the desk. Frank's heart nearly stopped. They were copies of the exact photographs he had hidden in his safe. "November 23rd, 1963, Sullivan said. "Someone delivered certain documents to your residence. We know you received them. We know you still have them." Frank realized he was trapped. "I think I need a lawyer. Mr. Sinatra, we're not here to arrest you. We're here to offer you a choice that could save your life." Sullivan leaned forward. "We know you didn't kill President Kennedy, but we also know that certain parties are planning to frame you for it. Sam Giancana is preparing to make you the fall guy for Dallas." Frank felt his world tilting. "What are you talking about?" "They're going to say you were the link between the mob and the Kennedys, that you facilitated the assassination out of personal revenge over Palm Springs. The beauty of it is that it's partly true you did have connections to both sides." Agent Hosty spoke up. "We want you to work with us. Get close to Sam again. Record conversations. Help us expose the real conspiracy. In exchange, we'll protect you from becoming the scapegoat." Frank was given 24 hours to decide. The next day, Frank called Sullivan. "I'll do it." Frank was fitted with a recording device and called Sam. On December 23rd, 1963, Sam arrived at Frank's compound looking tired and suspicious. "You wearing a wire, Frankie?" Sam asked immediately. Frank forced a laugh. "Jesus, Momo, you think I'd risk my life recording you?" Frank showed Sam copies of the photographs. claiming someone was trying to blackmail him. Momo, I gotta ask you something. Did you have Jack Kennedy killed? The silence was deafening. Sam stood at the window for what felt like hours. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost reflective. You know what your problem is, Frankie? You still think like a civilian. You still think there's good guys and bad guys. Sam turned around. Jack Kennedy betrayed us. He used us to get elected, then turned his brother loose on us like rabid dogs. Bobby wanted to destroy everything we built. You think we were just gonna let that happen? Sam walked to the desk. Yeah, we killed Jack Kennedy, but we didn't do it alone. We had help. Official help. The CIA. Guys in Washington who wanted Bobby neutralized just as much as we did. Frank felt the wire burning against his chest. Who in the CIA? Sam smiled grimly. You think I'm gonna give you names? This thing goes all the way to the top, Frankie. Everybody who matters wants it buried. Sam finished his drink. The beautiful thing is everybody wins if it stays buried. The CIA don't want people knowing they work with the mob. We don't want people knowing we can reach presidents. And Johnson don't want people knowing his government is dirty. After Sam left, Frank sat in his study for hours. He had just recorded a confession to presidential assassination from one of the most powerful crime bosses in America. But he'd also learned the conspiracy involved the U.S. government itself. Frank delivered the recordings to Sullivan the next morning. The FBI had what they needed to prosecute the mob's involvement, but they also had evidence of CIA complicity that could never see daylight. What happens now? Frank asked. Now we make this problem disappear. Quietly. Permanently. The cleanup began immediately. Within 6 months, Sam Giancana was shot to death in his Chicago home while cooking sausages for dinner. The official story was rival mobsters. Tony Spilotro disappeared entirely. His body wouldn't be found for 20 years. Johnny Roselli, the mob's CIA liaison, was found dismembered in a steel drum floating in Miami's Biscayne Bay. One by one, everyone connected to the Dallas conspiracy met violent ends. Everyone except Frank Sinatra. Frank kept his bargain. He never spoke publicly about what he knew. When conspiracy theorists approached him with questions about Kennedy's assassination, he would deflect with jokes. When researchers asked about his mob connections, he claimed they were exaggerated by the press. But the secret ate away at him like acid. Frank had loved Jack Kennedy like a brother, and he knew the truth about who had killed him and why. Yet, he could never seek real justice, never honor Jack's memory with the truth. The manila envelope stayed in Frank's safe for 35 years. Occasionally, when the pain became unbearable, he would take them out and look at the evidence again, remembering that November day when his world changed forever. Frank's behavior changed dramatically after Dallas. He became more paranoid, more controlling, more suspicious of everyone around him. He trusted fewer people, revealed less of himself, built higher walls around his private life. Friends noticed he never again spoke fondly of his political connections. The weight of the secret affected every relationship Frank had for the rest of his life. He couldn't get close to anyone without wondering if they might discover what he knew. He couldn't enjoy his success without remembering how it was built on violence and betrayal. On May 14th, 1998, Frank Sinatra lay dying in his Beverly Hills home. His daughter Nancy was at his bedside when he called her closer with the last of his strength. "Nancy," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "There's something in the safe. Papers, photos. When I'm gone, burn them. Don't read them. Don't show them to anyone. Just burn them." Nancy promised she would, not understanding the magnitude of what her father was asking. Frank Sinatra died that night, taking America's biggest secret to his grave. Nancy kept her promise. The manila envelopes and their explosive contents were reduced to ash and scattered to the wind over the Pacific Ocean. The truth about November 22nd, 1963, died with them. Frank Sinatra had spent 35 years protecting a secret that could have rewritten American history. In the end, he chose loyalty to his country over loyalty to the truth. He chose stability over justice. He chose silence over vindication. Some secrets are too dangerous to reveal. Some truths are too powerful to survive. And sometimes, loving your country means carrying its darkest burdens to your grave. Frank Sinatra understood that better than anyone.